Hey, everybody, and welcome into the College GameDay Podcast for Monday, August 19th. Yes, it is the Monday of week 0. Pete Thamel joins us now. Reese Davis is not here because he's currently on an airplane that I'm assuming is playing Irish music, and people are dancing jigs in the hallway, in the aisle and all that. So he's headed over to Dublin. But we're here. Pete Thamel, week 0. How you feel?
Never been better. I am mostly anticipating the most anticipated college football season of all time, and I love week 0.
People don't know what we're getting into. Everyone
Very
wanted
fair.
an expanded playoff. They want all this, but me explaining to my wife, by the way, we can't take our annual trip right after January the 9th to go to Key West or whatever. We have to wait till right before I go to Daytona in February. I used to get a month. Now I get about 2 weeks because the season lasts until January the 20th. And, by the way, we have football games in the middle of December. And New Year's Eve is when things are really just getting started. Like, you tell me, do you think people really understand how the 12-team college football playoff works? Because my answer is no.
So this would not go for the people listening to this podcast, right? If you were listening to the College GameDay Podcast, I would think for the vast majority of them, at least if you're a year-round listener, if you're just like, oh, college football starting, need to study up, like me when I took hard classes at Syracuse, it's deep enough to I better take the plastic off that book and give this thing a peek. I think I live in Boston, so I'm around a lot of non-college sports fans who are huge sports fans, right? Spend a lot of time on sports, fantasy sports. They bet, they watch the NFL. They know an in-depth amount. I would think if you polled 1,000 casual sports fans or just general pro sports fans, I would say only 40% of them could tell you there's a 12-team playoff this year.
Yeah. And the ones
that would be my guess.
It's fair. And of the 40% who know, I would put it at 15% or lower that understand how it works. And that's fine.
Oh, yeah. Once you start getting to Notre Dame can't get the bye and all that stuff. No, there is going to be a constant re-education of this as we go through. I'm sure you'll be doing it on Nation. I know we'll be doing it on Game Day. I just feel like that is there is a part of me, Ryan, the longer I've done this, that every year you almost have to tell the audience, whether you're writing or on TV, who the stars are going to be. Yeah. Hey, this guy is going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the ACC, and you might not know his name from last year. And the league's changed so much, and the teams changed so much, and the players changed so much. There's always a process of re-education, I feel like, that the media day into August is part of. Now, this is just a holistic, I think people are going to be like, whoa, Texas is in the SEC? What? When did that happen?
Yeah, well, this weekend, week 0, only 4 games, and SMU's first game as a member of the ACC. I was at ACC Media Days, which we'll get into in a minute, but it was the weirdest thing. I posted it. You're on the elevator at the hotel, and you're going from the lobby up to get your credentials, and they got all the school logos, stickers, these decals on the thing, and you're on the escalator going up, and there's Clemson, and there's Florida State, and there's North Carolina, and Duke, and Virginia, whoever else. You're like, oh, SMU, that's weird. And then, oh, Cal, that's super weird. Stanford, what the hell is going on? Where am I right now? But it's weird, but to me, it's also exciting. But I'm telling you, when we get to January 20th, which is also, by the way, I think Inauguration Day. I know it's Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
And, by the way, the College Football Playoff National Championship is that night in Atlanta. It's just people don't know. They do not know. And it's going to be I did McAfee's show, I believe it was this past summer, and said on the show, man, it's crazy, right, that we're going to be playing football, college football, till January 20th. And literally out loud, McAfee went, what? Did we know this? And, he's on game day. So to me, I think that kind of sums it up. But it's going to be great, but it's going to be very, very different. All right. Starts with week 0.
Can I make one point about the ACC and the elevator real quick?
Yeah, please.
So I did that, and then I went to Big Ten that week.
Yep.
And I just looked around at all the different logos and all the different places in this moment of time, especially the ACC, and you see the Cal, you see the Stanford. And my reaction was, okay, that's weird. But it was also like, this is not forever. Like we are going like this is a very, very uneasy truce of these 17 schools. And obviously there's legal battles that are making change. But that was my primary reaction. It's like 10 years from now, we're like, hey, remember that season or couple seasons where Stanford, Cal, SMU, where it is not forever. And the hows and the whys, there'll be smarter judges and potentially juries looking at those things. But like for right now, it is just like, okay, this is a moment, and it's an interesting moment, and it's a somewhat confusing moment, and there are going to be more moments down the line. So, don't get the ACC standings tattooed on your bicep if you're like a really big SMU fan, because that's probably not going to be forever. Let me answer this, Ryan. As Reese knows, I like to hijack the podcast with thoughts that lightning bolt in my mind here. What do you think Carolina does? Because that's really the future of the ACC is. Yeah. That's the crux question. This isn't a new thought or concept. People have been writing it. I've been writing it for months. They are the linchpin. That is all known. And it's such a powerful thing. You living in North Carolina and knowing that league so well is one of the reasons I asked, because North Carolina is the ACC. Yep. North Carolina doesn't want to be the saboteur that ends up in the first line of the obituary of the ACC. And they're like, smart. They're sitting back. They're saying, okay, you go handle all those Leon County courts and we'll just watch and see what the path is. But where do you think that the mindset of that institution is right now? Well, they have the best lawyers. I think that's well documented. It's how they got out of the academic scandal. They set the precedent now that everyone knows in this modern era. If you're willing to wait out the NCAA or a conference or whatever, if your lawyers are good enough, you can do it. I mean, North Carolina's the one that showed everyone this path. And so they're so smart and they're absolutely right. And they know who they are. And, I grew up on Tobacco Road and, every conference has the school that the rest of the conference unofficially has to go through. Just how it is, it'll anger people when they hear it, but in the SEC, it's always run through Tuscaloosa. It just has, in the Big Ten, it's always run through Columbus and Ann Arbor. In the Pac-12, it always ran through, USC, and the ACC, it's always run through North Carolina. It just has. I mean, I mentioned John Swofford. He was the athletic director there and became commissioner of the ACC. So you're exactly right. That's the answer. All due respect to Clemson and Florida State. The real people, the real power brokers are watching North Carolina. And then the question is, who goes with North Carolina? Because if North Carolina does eventually make a move, and you probably have heard this too, the word is they kind of have a partnership with Virginia. And the reality is that Virginia Tech's probably a better fit for other conferences. But if North Carolina says, well, we'll come, but we're bringing our friends from Charlottesville with us, then that's how that's going to go down. And so it's going to be really, really, but it is the interesting part to me is long term. What are these meetings like? Like, what is it like for USC, who has always believed that the Pac-12 went through them, to sit in a meeting now with Ohio State and Michigan, who could care less? That like, okay, great. Congratulations on everything you did on the West Coast. We don't care. How is that going to fly?
Good job in water polo.
Right. Well, long term, Texas, as we all know, has believed whatever conference they were in, Southwest, Big 12, whatever, it went through them. Now they got to sit in a meeting with Alabama and with Georgia. And you think they care? And so when North Carolina, who's used to having everything go through them, has to sit in a meeting somewhere else, that's going to be interesting. But the reality is the money is important and all those things, but in Chapel Hill, basketball still rules. And all they're going to care about is, what will our basketball status be? And it's the truth. Football pays for everything. But in the end, as Mac Brown will tell you, it is a basketball school first and foremost, more than any other program in the country. And so when whatever they decide to do, if they decide to do it, it's going to be, do we still have the big boy seat at the end of the table? And how does it affect basketball? And so it's going to be really, really, but it makes a lot of sense with the SEC, because they care very much about keeping that map intact and all the states connecting. Exactly right. That's a big, 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 big deal for Sankey. So if you were to add North Carolina and add Virginia, that fits right through there. So we'll see, man. What do you think?
I'll be curious if there's a legal tether to NC State.
There's been some smoke about that. Remember the one of the reasons why Larry Scott failed in getting Oklahoma and Texas is because they had to drag along Oklahoma State and Texas Tech.
Right.
That would have happened.
Right.
Like, talk about wild history bending moments. You know what I mean? Like, so there's been chatter that there may be some attachment to NC State to UNC, and how would that affect things? Right. I think it would affect it pretty dramatically. Yeah, Virginia's an interesting case too, because the very divisive when you bring that up, that they may be more attractive than Clemson or Florida State, right? Because the results on the football field don't indicate that. It's a great market, it's a great school. It certainly would be a great fit in the Big Ten, right? Because you grab Virginia, North Carolina, you're contiguous going 100%. Down too. So that is, as those two leagues are now holding hands and singing Kumbaya, Ryan, like there's a battleground, right? It's north for Sankey and it's south for Tony Petitti, and it's going to be really interesting. I don't think, in fact, I'm pretty confident we're going to have any distinct moves before the end of the regular season. Like, I think we get a quiet couple months here. I think legal processes have to play out. August 15th came and went with no, which is like when you have to declare. A year from now on August 15th could be a little bit different. There's the TV contract renewal that comes February 1st that I think is really the next important mile marker. How does the CFP shake out in terms of access? Obviously, I mean, the CFP is now like Tony and Greg's ball of yarn that they bat back and forth to each other, right? Like that's really what it's come to. I mean, if you look at the deal the ACC could have gotten when they did their grand filibuster and such, and ended up pushing the expanded playoff back by a year. I mean, it literally cost schools outside those Power Two hundreds of millions of dollars because they waited and filibustered. And then what happened was the plate tectonics shifted, and there's unequal ground now. It was unequal before, but it was equally paid ground. And Sankey Bettini looked around and said, "We're just gonna Pac-Man up the money in the land here," and they floated the automatic qualifier. So there are some big pivot points here before I think we get to any kind of decisions. But yeah, doesn't realignment just always hijack things? Like, you can't have like a quick realignment conversation, right? It's just
you can't at all, and it also just dominates everything, because here we are with games on the schedule.
Actual football games. We like
actual
those
football games, and when Florida State is playing overseas, there's no way you can talk about any of that without talking about the fact that they're in court right now against the conference. And just football wise, I understand everyone's very bitter in Tallahassee about what happened last December, and I get it, rightfully so. But looking forward, the money's the money, and I get it, and you understand your check's not as big as the check that schools in your state are getting in Florida, right? But ultimately, the goal is to play for national championships. And what's your pathway to get there? It's why Florida State joined the ACC 30 years ago, because now we have a chance to win a conference title, and we have a better path to play for a national championship. That's what Bobby Bowden knew. And so the question is, long term, if the ACC can hold it together, and if the ACC can continue into the future, which I hope it does, as a North Carolinian, I don't think there's anyone that wants the ACC to go away.
Nobody wanted the Pac-12 to go away. It's preposterous that it's gone, quite frankly.
I still honestly can't process it. I can't. It's like, I know you just saw Springsteen. This is a great line, right? When Clarence Clemens passed away, Springsteen's line was, what's the world going to be like without Clarence Clemens? He says, that's like asking what the world's going to be like without rain. That's how I feel about the Pac-12. It's gone. Yeah. It's the strangest. I cannot process it. But if you're Florida State and you're Clemson, what's the easiest road to get to a national championship game or to get to the playoff?
I mean, it's not even close.
You're in every year. You got your off year, but for the most part, you're in the hunt all the way to the first weekend of December. I just don't.
What if you're North Carolina, Ryan, and you haven't won the ACC since 1980, I believe?
Yes.
Maybe Taylor, 81. I think 81 was NC State.
Yeah, 81 was NC State. Yeah.
And 80 was Carolina. Neither have won it since.
I grew up a North Carolina State fan, so I'm very bitter about all of this. But yes,
well, at least they haven't had any expectations they haven't met since then.
No, until this year. Now we'll see, right? I mean, North Carolina State has just had the greatest athletic year in the history of the school, without any question, across the board. College World Series, women's, men's Final Four. I mean, Dave Dorn had a great fall, but this year they have a chance to continue that with what I think is a pretty good football team. But yeah, but what's the better path to the playoff? Is it living in the ACC where Clemson and Florida State have ruled the roost with some Virginia Tech mixed in there for a while, or is it going and playing ball in the SEC or even in the Big 12? I just don't, or the Big 10 for God's sakes. It's just, I don't. Yeah. It is what it is. So I don't know. It's a weird deal. And by the way, Florida State plays. There's an ACC game this weekend, Pete.
Yeah, I will be there. I will be there.
When do you leave?
I leave Tuesday night into Wednesday. I will get to Dublin from Boston quicker than the next week when I have to go to College Station. It will be a shorter trip for me.
Yeah. Well, College Station is not easy to get to.
No.
And the good news is once you get there, I actually feel better now because I'm going to Gainesville week 1. We're going to do Marty McGee and SEC Nation for
fun.
Yeah, Miami and Florida. First time that game's been played in a long time.
Great
and
game.
I was complaining about the fact that I was going to have to get out the Gold Bond because we're going to be sweating through 6 pairs of pants. But I don't feel as bad anymore because you're going to College Station, and College Station is only slightly less hot than the surface of Mercury. So on Labor Day weekend. So enjoy that.
Really excited for the game because I think it's going to be a good football game. I really think Georgia Tech is in a position where in an opener with all the weird variables, they can hang around and have a puncher's chance. Now, like Florida State, I picked Florida State to win the ACC. I picked Florida State to make the playoffs. So I'm not shirking from that, but I do think there's an elite matchup in this game, and it's Tech returning 5 starters on the O-line against Florida State's D-line, which I think is the best in all of college football.
Yeah.
I really think Florida State has built this thing into a consistent playoff contender and a league champion last year, undefeated regular season, for the very simple reason that they have built their offensive line and defensive line to be like the SEC in terms of talent and in terms of depth. And in the interior, they have Darrell Jackson and Josh Farmer, who look like SEC defensive linemen. They're big, they're athletic. They grew up together and are like the closest of the closest of friends. They grew up in a small town outside Tallahassee. Farmer went straight to Florida State. Jackson bounced around a little bit before making his way back. I believe went to Maryland and Miami. And I'd be pretty stunned if there's a better pair of edges in college football than Patrick Payton and Marvin Jones Jr. A&M may have an argument if Shamar Stewart comes on, and they're you can obviously pick a couple, but Patrick Payton, this is my favorite stat, Ryan. He had 10 tipped balls last year as a defensive end. 10. I never heard of that for a D lineman. I mean, you're a first-team All-American corner if you have 10 tipped balls, right?
Yeah.
And then Marvin Jones Jr. was obviously a big-time recruit. His dad obviously is one of the all-time great Knowles.
One of the great nicknames in the history of the world. Shade
Which
Tree.
Was?
Shade Tree. They call it Shade Tree.
Shade Tree.
You see, you're so New England, right? I have to explain this to you. All right, so Shade Tree is a tree that is so big that it provides shade. Like a hot day, you sit under the shade tree, and they call it, and it's so big it casts a shadow over everything around it. And so Shade Tree Jones, to me, was one of the all-time nicknames.
It's a great nickname.
This is the first time since I lived in Bristol, Connecticut, that I've had to explain what a shade tree is. So the look on your face was
Marvin Jr. can give a little shade too because he's a big hombre coming off the edge there. So I feel like that is like where you start with Florida State is that this could be a low scoring game as DJU gets accustomed to the Florida State offense, and they obviously have a lot of holes to fill. I think Lawrence Toafili, their back, who took over that ACC title game, is really poised to emerge as one of the top backs in college football this season. And they have, again, another very solid offensive line in front of him. And there's some new skill, right? Sometimes it takes some time to adjust. DJ's going to settle in. So I think we could see a short, ground-driven game, line of scrimmage focused. Florida State figures out a way to win. Haynes King, obviously, is one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. Were you in College Station the night he beat Bama?
Yes. That was something else, and it's interesting now because we are living in this era where I've seen him play, I've seen DJ play several times, and we're still covering them, but they're in different places. I like DJ a lot. I like talking to him. He's smart. Sometimes it just doesn't work. And so I love the second chance factor of the transfer portal.
Yeah.
And I always go back to Jalen Hurts, and I always go back to a lot of these guys that I go back. JT Daniels is one of my favorite athletes I've ever interviewed.
Great kid.
And people like to kind of crack jokes about the fact he was a starter at 4 different schools. I loved it because it was 4 chances to hit a reset button, and it was fun watching him be happy. So that part of it I like. And listen, the wild card in this game, we joke about going to Ireland and all that, but I had a conversation with Mike Norvell about this at ACC Media Days, and I said, all right, tell me about the logistics of playing your first game of the year overseas. And his response was, well, which answer do you want? Do you want the politically correct answer, or do you want the honest answer? And I go, give them both to me. He said, well, the politically correct answer is, he goes, and this is accurate. He goes, it's amazing. He goes, and we have the opening weekend to ourselves. We have this primetime slot on ESPN. Pete, I was out at D23 in Anaheim.
Yep.
And we were doing this whole promotion of the opening weekend, and they're the only week 0 game. And we got this marble, comic
high noon, 3-hour game day going into it.
It's fantastic. I mean, you got no two programs that have a bigger stage than Florida State and Georgia Tech.
Do you remember that terrible Nebraska Northwestern game? Sorry to cut you off. It was terrible, one of the worst games. I have to look it up, but like 8 million people watched that game. Yeah. And it was god awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Only game Northwestern won that year. Pat Fitzgerald's last win, I believe.
Yeah. And even the people overseas were like, why are they here? Like, why are these schools here? I mean, other than the fact that this one head coach looks like one of us, the rest of it, why are we here? But then all the good Catholic kids from Nebraska, why are these two teams here? But then Norvell paused, and he goes, all right, now I'll give you the honest answer. He goes, this is a huge pain in the butt. Huge pain in the butt. And he walked through, everything you got to do. And he's talking about the opportunity for the athletes to go over there. And he goes, we're going to turn this into, most of the teams have never been overseas. We're going to turn this into a fantastic trip and a fantastic opportunity. He goes, but football wise, he said, it is a huge pain in the butt.
Yes.
And so there's that factor.
4.4 million watched that terrible game, by the way. But I imagine we'll get a similar number noon.
Have to. I mean, I can guarantee you one watching from North Carolina. But that factor, I don't think can be overstated, which is, how do you handle that? And I think Georgia Tech's done this before, and Florida State has not logistically. And so it's going to be that part of it. I'm not saying it'll be a factor, but I'm saying don't be surprised if it's very
that thing
draggy.
doesn't look clean
in the first quarter.
Well, week 1 never is, right? Week one is when everybody's figuring everything out. From the officials to the coaches to the players, everyone's they're getting their sea legs. And so now you're getting your sea legs with some jet lag. And so it's going to be it could be a factor, might not be a factor, but chances are the first half will not be the cleanest half of football that you will watch this year.
Yeah, week 0. Well, this is my theory on like the start of college football is, and again, we love it, right? There's so much build up, preseason rankings, power rankings, projections, like all of a sudden those become realities.
Yep.
When we're really just guessing, right? Like when it comes down to it, we're really just completely guessing, but those things get repeated and amplified and copied and all of a sudden that's reality. And then they actually snap the ball. Each program has 40 new players. Nobody knows anything, Ryan, right? Like nobody really knows anything. Yeah. So all of a sudden there's just this, like somebody breaks the wedge and all of that is like somebody in the top 10, it starts 0-2 and they're like on a long climb back to the 12-team playoff. And that's the beauty of it, right? Like, but we should never be surprised still, especially with the amount of player movement. There's just so much roster turnover that I can't even, Reese and I've talked about, I think it was Dave Aranda at Big 12 Media Day was like, how do you guys even pick these? Like, there's so many new players. Yeah. And I was like, hey, fair, like totally fair. Yeah. So it's, look, we can talk about it later, but SMU, I think, is a 28-point favorite at Nevada, right? And we know a good amount about SMU. They have a bunch of guys back. They did well in the portal. Nevada's new staff, a boatload of new players under Jeff Choate. And we don't know anything about them.
No.
Like, Nothing.
No.
So we could talk about that game later, but it's just like, what about New Mexico? God, Bronco comes in and, it's a total reset. And, so who do you like?
Fascinates me. Bronco Mendenhall fascinates me. I go back to, I'm one of the things that I think isn't being talked about enough, and certainly will be when the game gets here, is the fact that in the new Big 12, BYU, Utah is there. Right. The Holy War's there. It's going to be there. Now it's conference game, like all that. I love that game so much. It's the biggest, it's the one game I've never been to that I have always covered. Like I'm very, very open about it. As a kid, I was a mountain football junkie. Like I'm the one that would stay up till 2:00 in the morning to watch San Diego State and Hawaii. And so I love BYU, Utah. Because of that, I'm fascinated by Bronco Mendenhall because we all remember the video of him walking off the field and suddenly screaming at fans in the stands, at Utah and all that. And then I got to know him a little bit at Virginia, which I still am not sure why I took the job. And but he dug it. He wanted the challenge. He wanted the challenge. And now, I think my 11th or 12th year at the bottom 10, I know New Mexico really well. And so taking this job
doing the bottom 10, is this like a dozen years?
Yeah, this will be, I think, the 12th year. Which is crazy.
You really know bad football.
No, I do, and I say it all the time. The best part of it is when a team turns the corner.
Oh,
and
sure.
And when I send them off into the UTSA, when I send the UTSA off to a bowl game, I feel like like I just dropped my daughter off of college. That's how I feel when Georgia State. When Georgia State, who was my inaugural bottom 10 champions 12 years ago, when they started going to bowl games, I felt like I was going to bowl games. I felt like it was my alma mater. So, but the challenge is there for Bronco. But he's dig. He doesn't really care about the stuff that we think all these coaches are just laying in bed at night thinking about. He wants the challenge. That's the only reason you take that job. And so I'm really fascinated to see. And then in a similar note, he's there because it's his alma mater. The nightcap game will be Delaware State at Hawaii on week 0 that will roll into Sunday. And I love Timmy Chang, and I love him because, and I may have told you this or not, but talking about my daughter, she's in college now, college sophomore, but she was born in the fall of 2004.
Okay.
And back then I wasn't traveling every weekend like I am now. And my daughter, bless her heart, was a screamer. I mean, she just all night long. She was a sweet kid, but she wasn't sick. She just didn't want to go to sleep. So 2:00 in the morning, baby, it'd be me and that child in the basement of my house trying to let my wife sleep. And every Saturday, I remember Hawaii ended the year in 2004 with 4 straight home games. And I had the ESPN goal line package.
Ooh.
And I would watch the local Hawaii broadcast at 2 a.m. Eastern, and Timmy Chang would be hanging 4 touchdowns and 500 yards on Michigan State. I think it was Michigan State, like UAB. It was but Timmy Chang set all of his records. So Timmy Chang's the only thing that kept me sane when my daughter was screaming and throwing up as a child, as you have experienced recently. And
yes.
God bless Timmy Chang. God bless him. He was my psychiatrist that fall.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like how these games get scheduled, right? SMU had Vanderbilt ditch them in January. Hard to get a January game, so they basically just begged Nevada to play them because you only had so many people who could play you. If you play Hawaii on the road, you can schedule a 13th game. So that's basically how that game played. SMU going to Reno for that game. Now, I do think we're going to break down the barriers of week 0 here soon, Ryan. And I do think week 0 is going to become week 1, right? 100%. As all this happens. Like the embers are there. Does this happen next season, the season after? By the way, great for the sport to have 2 NFL regular season free weekends of exposure to dive in. Hey, get to know Garrett Nussmeier before Miller Moss, before the season. Like, take advantage of your windows. What's the crazy stat of like 96 of the top 100 viewed programs in America are NFL games?
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to change, right?
No, it's not.
So, and there's going to be places on the calendar where they bump in. And I know the playoff is one of those, but I do think the the oxygen of an NFL free weekend, at least of the regular season. Plus preseason, I just don't feel like drives any NFL in. I just feel like people are like,
no one cares.
You may watch your team if you really are like into the roster, but once that NFL regular season starts, man, it gobbles up a lot of America's attention. So I really feel like if there's, college football leaders would be wise, since they're already doing it anyway, to go. Now, look, that's an extra week on everybody, but also like Rhett Lashley was very blunt about wanting two buys throughout the season because they're going to be traveling a ton in this new ACC. Now they travel a ton in the AAC. Let's be honest,
right.
but they're kind of spaced out for them to go through. So. God bless week 0. Let me give you 2 Nevada notes, Ryan, because they're fresh in my mind.
Okay.
One is that the kid who's gonna get a lot of care time is Savion Red, who was a recruit who went to Texas, who would probably be Texas's starting running back right now with the injuries they've had. If he wouldn't be the starter, he and Jaden Blue would be splitting carries. He would be right in the front of that room. I was told yesterday he's been a real dude during camp, but the fun guy, the most interesting guy in that game to me is Keaton Crawford. Do you know who Keaton Crawford is?
Yes. I haven't thought about that name in a while.
So Keaton Crawford was the single best, it's Kitan Crawford. He was the single best special teams player in college football last year. He would have been a 5th or 6th round pick. He's a defensive back for them. I think he's going to play field safety. He would have been drafted in last year's NFL draft simply because he is such a special teams demon. And that's rare. You get maybe one of those a year.
That's like Steve Tasker, Bill Bates. That does not happen at all.
Yes. So he had an interception against Bama last year. He had a huge blocked kick in the Kansas State game. But I remember talking to scouts before Texas Bama, and a couple brought him up. They're like, "Oh, he's going to get invited to the combine. He's going to get drafted just on special teams." So he follows Choate from Texas to Nevada to play more snaps in the secondary and round out his game a little bit. But don't be surprised if he busts through the line at some point and blocks kick. That's just if you're locked and loaded for that game, which I believe is the 8 p.m. Eastern nightcap, kind of a fun player to track and watch in that game.
Hey, we're talking about players to track and watch, and earlier we were talking about second chances and transfers and all that. Ohio State names Will Howard starting quarterback. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Your reaction? Surprised? Not surprised? I mean, this is going to be Chip Kelly's guy now. A guy that yes, this is the same kid that we saw bring glory to Manhattan, Kansas, with the Big 12 championship. Mm-hmm. All right, I'm not surprised. No. Just because of the player that we saw play last year. I don't think anyone's surprised, but it's officially official now.
Yeah, so I think the one thing Will Howard gives Ohio State this year, Ryan, that they didn't have last year is the threat of the run. Kyle McCord was a very good quarterback. He had a very good season. He was like sort of your classic statue drop back, Parcellsian kind of era passer. Especially now with Chip Kelly as the OC, who's produced a slew of top 20 rushing teams in a row at UCLA. The threat of the run. Now, I don't think anybody can design a zone read better than Chip, right? Like the threat of that run for Will Howard brings another element of dynamism to the offense, not to mention they have the best tailback tandem in the country. So, Will Howard, obviously Emeka Egbuka's there. Jeremiah Smith has generated a ton of buzz, the true freshman receiver from South Florida there. So, that offense is good to go. My question remains the offensive line. I need to see it to really get there in terms of belief, right? But Will Howard is a winner. He's a gamer, high character, high IQ. I'm not saying he's going to be first team All Big Ten, but he's a very good college quarterback who I think has a great coordinator who's going to design the right system around him.
A great coordinator who, by all measures, seems to be very happy right now. And
yes,
and by all measures. If anyone went out to Westwood to see Chip Kelly while he was head coach at UCLA, he never looked very happy to me. He always had that. Chip never looks happy anyway. Even when Chip's having a great time, he looks miserable, right? But at UCLA, even when things were starting to turn around, always looked like his underwear was about 6 sizes too small. You know what I mean? He does not look like that anymore, right, in Columbus. Now we'll see. We'll see what it feels like if we get into October.
Is that a Southern saying or is that a you saying?
I made that up.
Okay. All right.
It might be inappropriate. It might be me already worried about going to Gainesville and going to College Station, week 1 when it's 5,000 degrees with a humidity of 98%. I mean, I don't know if you've been to Columbus, I don't know if you talked to this guy, but just what I've heard from, what I've talked to people about, everyone says Chip Kelly looks like he's grooving right now. Like he's really enjoying himself because, as you know, the biggest transition for all these guys when you get the dream job and you become the head coach or whatever it is, you miss coaching football. And the Chip Kelly at Oregon, who really just focused on ball all the time, and the Chip Kelly at UCLA, who had to focus on other stuff, the jobs become this other thing. And it was always a CEO job. I always tell the story about Mac Brown. When Mac Brown went from North Carolina, who we talked about earlier, to Texas, and I asked Coach Brown, so what's the biggest difference between coaching in Chapel Hill, coaching in Austin? He goes, all right. He goes, first year. He goes, we're all walking from the building to the practice field. He goes, on like Tuesday. And he goes, and a helicopter lands. Coach, you're coming with us. What are you talking about? He goes, I'm walking with the quarterbacks. And they go, no, you got to come with us because it's in your contract. It's the governor's wife's birthday. You got to go make an appearance at the birthday party. And he's like, I'm getting ready for Oklahoma State or whoever. But that's the difference. Yeah. And so when you're in a job where, and I feel like most Power 4 jobs are like this now, where you have to spend so much time in your pie chart with other crap that's not football, that, I'm curious to watch Chip Kelly. I'm curious to see what it's like in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I'm curious to see what it's like with we see with Will Muschamp at Georgia, who has quietly, anonymously built this juggernaut defense. And no one's talking about it because he's not allowed to talk to the media. But when I see Muschamp, he looks so happy. And no one looked more miserable than Will Muschamp when he was in Gainesville, Florida in particular. And so I'm really curious to see, because I like Chip a lot, and I'm really curious to see how it works. But, man, has there ever been a program, Pete Thamel, that has done more during an offseason to create this monstrous roster, seemingly overnight, like Ohio State has done, and the pressure they're going to face that Ryan Day was already facing if they don't just obliterate everyone?
Yeah, so I was going to point out that the job Chip Kelly has had the longest in his career was New Hampshire offensive coordinator, 1999 to 2006.
And I don't think would have ever left. Like if you gave him a chance again, I think he'd just stay.
Yeah, and he'd probably become the head coach. Sean McDonald, longtime coach there, just retired within the last 2 or 3 years. Ricky Santos, who was one of Chip's quarterbacks there, he won the Walter Payton Award. Ricky just took over as the head coach within the last few years. Their quarterback actually is going to start at Minnesota on Thursday night, opening Thursday. Awesome. Max Brosmer, who was a prolific guy there and ended up transferring up. But yeah, I feel like the Buckeyes have created a monster. I think it's the most interesting team in college football this year. I don't think if they lose a game, the world's going to fall apart, because I think teams are going to lose games now, and we need to rewire our minds a little bit for that. Georgia's going to lose a game this year, Ryan. They're going to lose a game in that.
No, they might lose 2. They are the best team in the country. Their schedule is awful. It's awful. And I've said this a lot of times over the last 2 weeks. No one's talking about that, but it's not just who they play; it's when they play them.
And
because
where?
you take the Auburn game now, which is first week of October, and they got to go to Kentucky. I mean, there's games in there that they're going to overlook, because in between those games is Alabama, and then right around the Texas game, they got Tennessee in the middle of November now, and so that schedule is awful. And the good news is, in the new playoff, you can have a loss. Sure. Maybe 2 and still get there.
You can have 2. There's going to be 2 lost teams in that playoff.
Right. Absolutely.
If Les Miles can win a national title with 2 losses, there's going to be some 2 lost teams between 5 and 11.
The panic that's going to set in.
Yeah,
just a natural panic. But yeah, I'm with you. But I interrupted you. But yes, Georgia will have at least 1 loss, I think, in the regular season, and I think they're the best team in the country. They could not win the SEC. They could not be in the championship game in December and still win the national championship.
Yeah. I do feel like Ohio State's identity. Ohio State quietly had an elite defense last year. They were top 3 country most categories. They return a vast majority of those players. So while there is pressure on the offense, there's questions on the O-line. We don't know what's going to happen with Howard. I am convicted that they will have a top 5 defense in the country this year. Just with Caleb Downs coming in, the amount of talent and depth they have on the defensive line. They'll get both corners drafted. Like, I just really feel like they're, the linebackers are good. But like, I really feel like there is like high end talent on that defense. So I think there could be some really ugly scores these first 3 weeks. They borrowed Michigan's non-conference schedule from the last 2 years, and I think Marshall's their hardest game. They open with Akron, so it will be interesting to see the identity built at that point, and then when they get going, what happens.
Akron, by the way, which, spoiler alert, is highly or lowly placed in the inaugural preseason bottom 10, which I think.
Oh yeah, they're going to have a spot. Yeah, they're
always there. I know them well. All right, we could talk forever. You and I hadn't had a chance to talk much this summer.
Yeah,
but you have to pack and get on a plane. You have to get your B12 and your hydration and all that before you. It's not about jet lag. It's about
Dunkin' Donuts. Not a paid sponsor. Actually, just a masshole who drinks Dunkin' Donuts.
South Boston Hydration is the Dunkin' Donuts. But before I let you go, I would be remiss as a journalist if I quoted Bruce Springsteen earlier. I have to ask you about the viral sensation, dude. So Springsteen. This was in Pittsburgh. It's you, Schefter, Hassan, Woj, right? All 4 of you guys are at one game.
Yes.
So when I was a kid, we would go to games at Clemson, and for 10 miles, you'd see all the South Carolina highway, the state troopers. And my dad's running joke was, this is the day to rob a bank in South Carolina, because every law enforcement officer in the state is in Clemson handling traffic.
Sure.
Was this the night that if you were the GM of any professional sports team, or you were the head coach of any, this was the night to pull off the deal. Or in the middle of, like, it's hard to be a saint in the city, was one of you running up to the bathroom to take a call, or in the middle of thunder crack, well, one of you guys, I'm sorry, I got to go outside, I got to take this call. What was that night like?
Well, it was a great night. It was a great day, and Woj was the maestro who organized it all. He invited some basketball coaches too. We had a very very good time. Nice meal there in the Steel City, and then the show was awesome. We had great seats. We weren't like in the front row, but we were like perfectly positioned, eye level, like halfway back in like one of those old Northeast hockey arenas. So no, it was a lot of fun. I would be disingenuous to say everyone pinky swore and put their phones away, right? Like, that wasn't going to happen in that crew. I had the one thing that was looming then was the Houston AD search, and I was kind of tipped during the day that it wouldn't happen that night, and I was very happy about that, because Woj and I went to Springsteen at Wrigley last August, and I had to leave for 3 songs because the ACC was meeting about expansion. They decided not to expand, but it took a while to they were meeting from 7 to 9, and I had to run out and miss a couple things. But such is the profession that we have signed up for, right?
I hope you have a great time. I know you will, for week 0 in Dublin, and we will be we got College GameDay, right? The whole 3-hour deal leading up to
we're going to be right by Trinity College, is my understanding. Okay. Not near the stadium, near the Temple Bar, I think. So, okay. All those details will sort of float out as the week goes on here. And talk about the real heroes of that trip are the logistics folks, right? Like, game day's a tough hombre every week just to get all those people lined up and get the stage built and get everything ready. So it'll be really interesting to see. Those are the most talented people in game day. The lead folks, logistics folks, all that. So it'll be really fun to see how all that comes together to make us look good. So
we're all the jerks that blow in like day before and go straight to the airport as soon as the show's over with. They've all been there for 4 days.
Yes.
So it's and it's tough enough to haul it all to Durham, or to haul it all to Austin. It's a whole other thing to put it on the ship. So,
correct. Yes.
But you guys have a great time, and
thank you, sir.
And we'll see you back stateside after Florida State, Georgia Tech. And in the meantime, y'all keep your ears and eyes out for the next edition of the College Game Day Podcast. And assuming that everyone gets through customs, Reese will be back soon. Thanks for listening.